For many kids and even some parents, it's the most dreaded 3 words of the summer: back to school. The time of transition for kids all throughout the local area as they move on from the ease of summer into the grind of the school year season. So how do we beat the anxiety of moving into a new school year? Here with some helpful advice is Dr. Melanie Schwartz from Viewpoint Psychology and Wellness. Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on to talk about this. We're still, for some kids, a few weeks away as we're doing this on the live show today. And for others, they may be watching this in the days or even the day before the school year begins. So as we ease out of the summer and we get toward the first day of school, what are some steps that parents and kids alike can take to sort of wind down the summer and get into school mode?
Well, there's lots of things. I mean, we're doing it in my house right now. We're talking about it, making sure they're prepared, making sure they have their school supplies, making sure we're getting them back on a good sleep schedule, getting them into a little bit of a routine that they've been out of all summer. So, kind of scheduling their days a little bit more than they have been. They're going to bed whenever they feel like it and kind of spending probably more time doing things that they're not going to be doing during the school year. So kind of getting them back into, well, at least for both my kids, actually, their sports have already started for the school year. So that's one thing that they've gotten back into already. So that's been helpful to kind of get them ready for school that starts in 2 weeks. Making sure they have their school supplies, taking them to go get those, if that's something that you do, helps them feel like they have a little bit more control. Talking about lunch, talking about what are they going to want to take in their lunch, helping them have a little bit more control in the situation rather than, this is what's happening, this is where you're going, just deal with it. It's kind of giving them a little bit of the control in terms of helping them get more comfortable with the idea.
Yeah, getting into that different mode of a little less free time, a little less ability to move your schedule around as it is. It's a lot more rigid when you go into the school year. Dr. Schwartz, there's different levels of this too, because kids of all different ages are going to be beginning the school year, whether it's elementary, middle, high school, or even those that are going off to college, university, or other schools for the first time outside of their K-12 education. Let's begin with the younger kids, especially those that are going to be going into kindergarten or into the grades for the first time. They're going to be going into their regular school day in their entire life, be away from their parents. So how do you make that transition? What's some advice in that case for parents that can help their kids and for kids as they get into this new routine?
I think the nice thing that the schools do is that the year before, if you know what school you're going to, they do, offer the kids to come see the school, see the classrooms. And I think that helps. And then having a conversation with them during the summer about what did you like about your classroom? What are you excited about? What are you scared about? I think it also helps, obviously, with all grades, have the opportunity to go to school before school starts. I know my kids get it, the day before school starts, where they can, meet their teachers, go see where their locker is, go, kind of get the lay of the land. Again, if it's a new school, that's really important because it helps them, again, feel like they have a little bit more control if they know what the classroom is going to look like and who their teacher is, and kind of meet the other kids in the class ahead of time to decrease their anxiety about it, because it's all anticipation anxiety. Once they get there and they get settled, they're fine. It's just a matter of not knowing and just not knowing what to expect. So everybody's better if they know what to expect. So the more information you can kind of give the kids, age appropriately, about what is kindergarten like? What are you going to be learning this year? What are you excited to learn? What's that going to be like for them? That's what's going to help the kids adjust and be comfortable.
And especially for those younger kids going into school for the first time, it's that first extended period of time that they're away from their parents.
Yes.
And not just that, but on a regular basis too.
Right.
So for parents that are really close with their younger kids and they have those super strong bonds, what is some advice, especially in these days and weeks leading up to the first day, to help maybe separate that a little bit more and see, get the experience for those younger kids of maybe being away from the parents or being a little bit more independent in this way?
Mm-hmm. I mean, definitely, I think it's different for different kids. Some kids are just going to go off and be perfectly fine and not look back. And they're ready and they're excited to go. And then there's the kids who have a little bit more separation anxiety because they haven't been away from their parents yet. And that, I I think it might be important to, if they have some friends, maybe take them over to their friends' houses and let them have a play date over there without you around, or take them over to a relative's house, same thing, without you around, just to kind of get a little bit more comfortable and adjusted to it. It's still not going to be the experience of school, but it's something if you're used to, being with the kids all day long, and it's something new. Um, Obviously talking to them, always talking, always communicating with them. I will say that about any of these topics that we talk about today. Making sure that you're talking to them. What are they afraid of? What are they nervous about? What's mom and dad going to be doing while they're at school? You know, and maybe just don't make it too exciting because you don't want them to have any FOMO. But talking about you know again, really making a big deal about what they're going to be doing at school, meeting new people, learning, just make it very exciting for them. So it's a place that they want to go. Even if parents weren't big fans of school, making it a big deal for the kids, because that's what makes them excited and more ready to get out of the house and go.
Yeah, and making that transition as comfortable as possible for those kids going back. Maybe school's a little bit more of an uncomfortable environment for them at that age. Or, of course, we've been talking a lot about those going in for the very first time. Dr. Melanie Schwartz is with us from Viewpoint Psychology and Wellness as we get ready for going back to school in the 2025-2026 school year. We started with the younger kids. Let's go into the middle school kids now. This is a kind of a paradigm shift, sort of the biggest paradigm shift we see other than going in initially to school altogether. Now it's really the first time they get that little taste of independence. Maybe they're going to different classrooms more often. They're certainly going to be blended in with more kids from different schools than what they've been used to for the past 5, 6, 7 years. Before that, what's your advice on helping parents help their kids navigate that big change?
Interestingly enough, sixth graders are usually very excited to go to a different school. They're ready. They had their big send off in fifth grade. They're done. They're ready to move on. They're ready to be the big kids the youngest in a bigger school, but they're ready to be big kids in a different school. Their biggest anxiety generally is around all the new kids and making new friends and what that's going to be like. Kids don't often have too many issues with switching classes. They're excited about it. The elementary school's done a good job of kind of prepping them, and even again took them over to the middle school to see what it was like, and they're ready to kind of have this new experience and be different from what elementary school was like. So most of these kids are very excited to go. Again, kids that don't like school, it's a little different of a story. Usually when there's a dislike of school, it's due to separation anxiety, fear of something's going to happen to the parents while they're gone, or grades are a struggle for them. But they do often, the thing when you ask those kids what they're excited about, it's about being able to see their friends. So, really hyping up the social piece of it all, even though I think everyone can agree, middle school is probably the most difficult years of the educational system socially, but the kids do get excited for it. So I personally haven't seen too many issues as part of the transition to middle school, because the kids are really, really excited about it. But again, as I've said before, I'll say it again, communicate with the kids. Ask them, even if they're not saying anything, even if they seem totally fine, just make sure you're talking to the kids. A lot of parents will say, well, if they're upset, I don't want to create some anxiety for them, so I don't want to talk about it. But it's more important to talk than not to talk. So just make sure, again, what are you excited about? What are you not excited about? How can I make it easier for you? What can we do ahead of time? So just so that the kids feel like they have more control, because that's what's going to make the transition easier for them.
And your kids, you've seen them from the day that they've been born until now. You know their mannerisms. Kind of when they're not feeling quite right, and you can sense that. Having those conversations is a great way to keep up with that. Dr. Schwartz, you made a really good point too, that middle school is kind of that most treacherous period of childhood, and from a school perspective, particularly on the social side. That can have a big impact on the kids, but that's also a really critical point for parents to have that involvement and have those conversations with their child or with their children and be able to do their part to help them through that as well. What advice do you have for parents in terms of intervening, having those sort of conversations, and helping their kids navigate a really difficult time in their youth?
I would really try to be very involved. Okay. Not in the school, but with the kids during this time, because everyone's maturing at a different rate at this point. You have some kids who have, gone through puberty at this point, some who are just about to, some who, are somewhere in the middle. And it gets to be difficult for them emotionally, the kids emotionally, because they're growing at different rates and going through this critical time at such different rates. And emotionally, that has a strong impact on them. So making sure that you are very involved in knowing what they're doing, knowing what their thoughts are, knowing, how they're feeling, how they deal with their emotions, what's going on. If you feel like your kid is not opening up, is very closed off, doesn't want to talk to you, that's a good opportunity to talk to the school about them maybe talking to the social worker, or even maybe getting them into therapy, where they have someone outside the family who can talk to them and kind of get their feelings out, because it is a really hard time emotionally for these kids during that age range. And the most important thing is just going to be that they're talking and they feel like they can talk to somebody. Again, it doesn't have to be a parent, it doesn't have to be a sibling, it doesn't have to be a family member. Just make sure they're talking to somebody and being able to kind of work through whatever's going on during that time.
Dr. Melanie Schwartz is with us from Viewpoint Psychology and Wellness. More information and ways to get in contact with them, viewpointpw.com. As we talk about going back to school, very similar sort of transition between elementary to middle school to high school for kids, but something that maybe isn't looked over too much when you're talking about the psychology or the mental health perspective of going back to school. It's those older high school kids. They've been through the motions. They're used to this, especially those seniors going into their final year. They kind of know what's going to be going on in those last few months of their schooling. Maybe they have their future sort of planned out already. And it's easy for them to sort of lose their focus along the way. Many times we hear about senioritis when they get into that point of the year. So for parents, how do they help to keep their kids focused as they go into their last year of high school, which some look at as being maybe less critical than the other three before, but can really have a big impact on setting them up for going into their adult life?
So this is really tricky at that age, because they're going to push back. They think they know it all, and they don't want anyone telling them what to do, especially their parents when they're seniors. And parents are kind of knowing they still need to parent and they still need to navigate and kind of push the kids forward to get them to that finish line for whatever that looks like, if they're going to college or whatever that next step is for them. And it's kind of a struggle to figure out how to communicate effectively with the kids. So, there's different approaches to this. It could be completely hands off. You tell the kids, if they're going to college, what you have to do to get into the college that you want to get into, and have at it. And, be there for them if the kids need it, but let them kind of take the lead and prepare them for college a little bit, where you are going to be completely hands off. The other approach that I do see happen sometimes with, the kids who are struggling a bit more, and they do need kind of somebody to lead them and guide them, is, you want to be able to lead them, but again, it's also this struggle of hands off, because, they don't want to be told what to do. So it's kind of how you talk to them is really the key. Not what you're saying to them. You're saying the same things to them. You're saying, hey, okay, this is what you have to do. This is when you have to do it. This is where you have to be. Whatever it is that you guys need to talk about, you have to get these grades. You have to, work on your college applications, all of those things. It's just a matter of how you're saying it to them. And if you're saying it to them in a very not controlling way, I guess would be the right way to say it, but kind of like, okay, here's your list. let's look at it, let's kind of go through it, but kind of stand a little bit more standoffish than maybe you have been in the past, then they're going to be more likely to do it. None of these kids, seniors, do not want to be told what to do. They don't. So make sure how you are saying something is the most important. It's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. And I guess that's the key to kind of get through senior year, because they are really ready to go and get out of the house and they're focused on college. And again, that senioritis thing does kick in probably more second semester than first semester, because they still got to get into college first semester. But it's there, and there might have to be a little bit of kind of just, I don't want to say walking on eggshells, because that's not, I don't want anyone ever walking on eggshells, but kind of just like how you approach it is key. So
yeah, kind of that point where you start to remove your hands from their shoulders, guiding them in the right direction, and kind of just walk alongside them, and occasionally give them a tap on the shoulder and say, hey, maybe a little bit more this way.
And just let them know you're always there for them. You are there to support them however they need it, but you got to step back a little bit to get them ready for that next stage.
Dr. Schwartz, we thank you for being with us. One last question for you. It's also a big time of transition for parents whose kids are now through high school, they're through their K-12 education, maybe they're going into the workforce, maybe they're going to a trade school, they're going to a college or university. That independence is pretty much up to about as close to 100% or at 100% for many of these kids. That's a big transition, particularly for the parents, on top of course, being one for the kids. So for parents that are experiencing this for the first time, letting one of their kids, maybe their only kid, out of the nest and into their own independent life, how do they navigate that transition in a way that is both beneficial, of course, to their child, but also isn't going to be necessarily a major source of anxiety for them that can take a toll on them as individuals or them as co-parents, but potentially as well?
I think, it's important to realize it's a grieving process.
Yeah.
So it usually starts senior year. And, once the kids get accepted into college, or they've discussed, what that next step is, and if they're going to trade school or they're starting a job, whatever it might be, or they're moving away, whatever it might be, that's when the grief process starts. And for parents to realize that it's a process, and, acknowledge your emotions about it. That's key. Okay. Because it's a complete transition that you haven't had for 18 years of this child's life. This is new, whether it's, the first child or the last child, somewhere in between, it is still going to be a big change to your life of not having, a child who's now an adult and moving on and starting this new step where you are no longer that your parenting role changes. It looks completely different after that stage. And so talking about it with, the co-parent, how are they feeling? How are you feeling about it? Talk to the kids. How do you want to be parented moving forward? Okay, because what you think it might look like versus what they expect it to be might look totally different. So have that conversation with the kids. As far as parents getting through it, if the kids who are going to college, and let's say you're an empty nester, it's going to be important for you to plan what your life is going to be like. Okay, what is that going to look like? How are you going to move forward without kids in the house? I think I've said this before in the past when we've talked about this, but my sister-in-law did this before, and she's done it every year now that she's an empty nester. She takes a trip once the kids are off to college. That way she's not sad. She's enjoying herself. She's going and doing her thing, and then she comes back and she can kind of reintegrate and figure it all out. But she did something enjoyable and can distract herself for a while instead of sitting at home and feeling sad that nobody's in the house right now, that's been great for her. So, figuring out what activities are you going to, or hobbies or new things are you going to incorporate, and figuring out what is life going to be like without kids. If you're an empty nester, if, it's one less child, your structure doesn't change that much. You still are going to be taking kids to school or whatever you have to do, and, still parenting quite a bit. But it's still going to be different without the one child. Another thing, have the conversation with your child if they're moving out, how often are you going to talk to them? Right now, you talk to them, I'm guessing, every day, right? Multiple times a day. But when they move out, how often do you expect to talk to them? Because that can be a factor too, where you're expecting to talk to your kid just as frequently, but the kid is like, oh, I'm good once a week, once a month, whatever it is. Have these conversations ahead of time so that you can prepare. Just like any other transition that's happening, going to school, as much as you can prepare, the better off everyone's going to be.
Got to get the kids ready to go back to school. Parents, got to get yourself ready to go back as well. Dr. Schwartz, always appreciate your advice, especially when we have something like this that has a careful balance for everybody involved going back to school. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Anytime.
ViewpointPW.com is their website. Facebook at Viewpoint Psychology. And you can also find them on Instagram at Viewpoint Psychology.